Hello, people of the internet. Steve Persh here, Director of Developer Experience at Pantheon. Today on the live stream, as always, we'll be talking about making sites on the World Wide Web. And we'll be leaning into the wide part and the web part of the World Wide Web today. Today, we'll be talking about situations in which an organization has related but distinct websites. Think about universities with sites for different academic departments, or a franchised business with lots of locations. Those websites have similar functionality, similar content, and similar audiences. So the people behind such sites commonly ask, is there some way we can systematically and efficiently share pieces of content between these sites? And of course, the answer is yes, it can be done, but how much effort is it? This problem space is one where I personally spent a lot of time about a decade ago. Sometimes the answer hinged on packing the related sites close together with, say, Drupal multi-site or domain access. But at Pantheon, we see a lot of downsides into shoving a lot of related sites into cookie cutter molds. That's why we have our custom Upstreams offering that we think is a better answer for sharing functionality across similar sites. We have customers who run literally thousands of related sites on custom Upstreams. But that mechanism alone doesn't address the sharing of content. To share content across related sites, custom Upstreams or otherwise, you're going to need to bring some Drupal modules or WordPress plugins, perhaps, but today we'll be looking at the Drupal side of things. And my experience tells me that configuring those modules requires a ton of upfront developer expertise. But that experience of mine is rooted in decades-old projects back in Drupal 7. I hear that it has gotten better. I hear that it has gotten easier in the last decade with Drupal 8, 9, and 10. So hooray. One of the people telling me that it has gotten better, that it has gotten easier, is Thiemo Mueller, co-founder and CEO of Content Sync. Thiemo, great to have you here on the live stream.
Hey, Steve, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so tell me a bit about Content Sync. My initial reaction is, skepticism, because I have seen, again, a decade plus ago, how challenging it can be to take content from one site and then share that content across different sites. But something led you to productizing that problem space. Could you share a bit of the background there?
Yes, definitely. So it's still complicated if you start from scratch, basically, but you don't have to. So basically, like 6 years ago, I've been in a very similar position. We've had a very similar journey, I would say. So we had actually two customers that had, one of them had over 150 websites to manage, and they wanted to share content between them, and there simply wasn't like a ready solution available that would also serve at this scale. And so we set out to create our own solution for these customers, but also saw a need in the market, and so decided to instead of pursuing like the agency route, we would go the product route and sell that as a service, where today we have even major large enterprises that are worth tens of billions of dollars trusting us with publishing their annual and quarterly earnings reports. So yeah, pretty excited for that.
Yeah, that's good to hear that not only is this working, it is working for some of the largest companies, some of the largest web properties out there. And although, in my intro and what we'll be focusing on today is that use case of related sites. I think part of what you were just hinting at there is that your company also addresses that problem space of moving a piece of content or perhaps related pieces of content from an unpublished state to a published state. Is that right?
Yes, correct. So these are basically two different use cases that we serve. So I guess the most obvious one would be that if you have 100 sites and you have to share content, it should be automated. The less obvious one is probably one that's applicable to every publicly traded company. So if you have very sensitive information, you don't want to prepare that on the Drupal live environment, but rather have like a private stage environment, simply because like the second a file touches an input field, it's publicly available. And if that happens with your quarterly earnings reports and anyone catches that, you're in kind of big trouble. So that's the safety problem we solved.
And as last week's Drupal security release reminds us, like, there are people out there who do pay attention to such things. And if you're a publicly traded company and you're uploading PDFs that are your quarterly earnings reports, and you're using a file pattern as simple as like name of company dash 2013 or
Q1, and then it's
23
Q2.
Q1. And people figure out like, oh, these hit the server an hour before, a day before, a minute before they're meant to be viewed. That is problematic when there's the stock market in play.
Exactly.
So in today's walkthrough of content sake, we I don't think we'll get into situations quite so high stakes as that. Let's start with a lower stakes, perhaps more familiar use case. So we brought up your screen share here. Drupalers watching here will be familiar with the Umami Food Magazine, and could you walk us through the basics of the content sync workflow?
Yes, definitely. So what you see on the screen right now are 3 different sites, but they all share the same code. So it's kind of similar what you can do with custom Upstreams as well. So you might have like a slightly different code base, but they should be very similar in code, but they do have their own file system, their own database, their own domain, and usually also their own region or target audience, their own team of editors sometimes working on them. In this case, we have site A, site B, and site C. As you can see, the content didn't change, but these are 3 distinct domains and distinct sites that we have set up using the Umami demo. So anyone familiar with Drupal would have seen this before. It's basically a demo site that just has a couple of demo recipes that we can now use to showcase how it works. The first round, we're just going to do the very basic example of automated push and pull operations, meaning that we automatically synchronize the content from site A to site B. For that, I'm just going to go ahead and create a basic page. Maybe I have to refresh these as well. I'm not sure if it's currently, but there we go. So I'm just going to go ahead and set it to published. As you can see at the bottom, there's not just the save button, but there's also a save and push button, which comes from our module, meaning that you can either save the content locally or you can push it to our service, and then our service checks how it should be distributed to other sites. And then on the right side, you have the Content Cloud menu. So that's where you can select different pools, and this is completely customizable. So in our example, to keep it simple, we have the site name in there. So like site A, site B, site C, which is probably very obvious where it goes. And then there's also the all pool connecting all of them. But they can be fully customized. So if you're doing, for example, a tenant application, maybe you're selling cars and different dealers can sell different models, then you might have different pools for these different models as kind of a categorization, so that a dealer that's selling one model does not get like the pages that for models they are not selling, for example. For now, I'm just going to save, which means that the content is, there we go. I forgot to assign the pool. So I'm just going to select all in this case, save the content. And now it's available on the site here, but it's not been pushed yet because I want to show you the other options you have for pushing. So one is that you can select one or more items. You can select the push changes action above here to push all of them, or you can go to the operations dropdown and just hit push changes. You see a quick confirmation dialog, and that's about it. So now we can even see the progress here. So this should be finished in a second to the other sides. Very simple content. So I'm going to site B. And in the content overview page, you can now see that I now have the page available, and that's it for the automated update.
I like that little animation. And we've got a comment here. Dave says, thanks for the demo. Can't watch live, but we'll watch the recording. And for anyone else watching live, feel free to drop in questions and comments. I certainly have some questions, some comments here. Like it feels simultaneously like, okay, we just moved around some data, no big deal. But it also feels like, whoa, I think I just saw a lot of complexity there in those few minutes. So to make sure that I understand all the pieces in play, let me bring back my handy dandy crayon diagrams. We'll bring in some Legos. We'll move this screen off, see if we can make this bigger. All right. So I had started my intro there with the idea of custom upstreams. For those subscribed to the Pantheon YouTube channel, there's a decent chance that you have more familiarity with the custom upstreams way of sharing code, where you may have different administrators for different sites. Here, again, academic departments. Thiemo, you mentioned that use case of car dealerships. That's certainly something. I've been in the market for a new bicycle, and I can't help but notice, oh, as I look around at these different bicycle shops, they're like obviously copying and pasting the same descriptions of the same bicycle as I try and find out, like, okay, where's the best place for me to get this bike? So in both, in all those worlds, there's that use case for sharing the content and sharing the code. And what we do with custom upstreams is provide a centralized Git repository that kind of overlays the mental model that Drupal and WordPress have always had for updating core code. So within the car dealership organization or within the university, there may be a central administrator who's kind of acting like a release manager for Drupal core or WordPress. They might have another developer testing out changes to code in a canary site, merging that into the shared code base, and then individual site administrators could pull in updates to the code through the Pantheon dashboard, again, the same way they would pull in updates to regular Drupal and WordPress code. So that is similar but distinct from what we just saw with content sync. Let me move out this diagram. So a difference here is that we have the content sync service as the content pool, and I'll bring in this blue guy, Thiemo. The hair is a little bit similar. I feel like that's appropriate. I did not do that on purpose.
Yeah, I'm not really blue, but yeah.
You're also not blue, but the hair swoop there has some similarity. So well, I think what we saw is you were playing all the roles there, but we could imagine there are different people involved. When we saw you editing content on site A, you edited and you chose to push your content into the content pool. And in that first use case, it's appropriate to like immediately send that content to sites B and C. And we saw as well there that there are different options, and I think in a minute we'll walk through the different ways these arrows could be activated. But like at the baseline, is my understanding of how content sync works accurate so far?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. I want I want to ask you a bit more about this part, because we saw the Drupal interface. We largely saw what was happening inside of site A, and like it looked very familiar to me as someone who spent a lot of time in Drupal. I'm like, I think that's good. You've got a module. It's using the built-in sidebar. You're using it. I presume the normal mechanisms for getting your module into that sidebar. And then I think overall it is a good thing that when you are acting as the content administrator, that site A, seems like you don't need to know that much about what is happening up here in the content pool, up here in the service that is provided by content sync. But for presumably the developer audience that may be watching here, they might want to know, like, what is what just happened there? Those arrows, those moved really fast. It said like 1 second up and 2 seconds down. Cool. Okay, but what just happened?
Yes. So yeah, you can configure all of your sites independently. So you can define or connect any site to any pool. You can define what
Hmm.
content should be pushed or pulled, when it should be pushed or pulled, and also how. So there's like a lot of advanced settings. So we have a very strong focus on making sure that we can be included into the workflows of our editors, of the editor teams that we want to support, rather than kind of forcing them to do it like the way we do it. So that's why we have like a lot of different options to meet a lot of different requirements and workflows. But that's fully configurable per site. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. And this content pool, like that's the content sync part. So much of everything we just saw in that brief demonstration, we were seeing inside of the Drupal interface, but
Mhm.
there are a few layers. Or I suppose I could draw like another box around all these sites to say like, hey,
Yeah.
all these sites were running on Pantheon, and then this content pool is running inside of the content sync service, which as we just saw, integrates just fine with Pantheon, and presumably could integrate with any Drupal site anywhere. And for those watching, like if you want to replicate what you've just seen here, like you can do so with a free trial of content sync, and I think using entirely free sites on Pantheon.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So I mentioned how there's a similarity here with custom upstreams, and like if you're going to do this use case at a very large scale, hundreds of sites, it's probably beneficial to have both of these mechanisms: content pool, a
100%.
content pool with content sync, and Pantheon custom upstreams. But like if you just want to get off the ground, I would recommend experimenting with only one at a time. Like what we're seeing here with just a simple site A, site B, site C, you don't need the additional overhead of custom upstreams in order to play around with content sync and validate whether or not that's going to be beneficial for you. When you get from like 3 experimental sites to like a dozen plus real sites, then you're probably going to want custom upstreams. As I reconfigure our view here, Thiemo, I've got one unscripted question for you. Do you have a tipping point number at which this module becomes, or this service becomes necessary or useful? With
Mhm.
custom upstreams, I have probably spent just as much time discouraging customers from using it who have like 2 similar sites. And younger Steve got very excited about like the repurposability of Drupal and like sharing modules and like, yes, do all these things. Okay, but the return on time investment comes when you get to larger scales. How many sites do you need for this to beat like the status quo of copy paste?
Yes. So, I mean, it depends on your motivation. So, why you're using it. It can be one site is the answer, because if you're using content staging, it's for one site,
That's
and
true.
it
That's
doesn't really
true.
matter because the value is in having it
Yes.
privately and then sync reliably in time to production. And so
Mm,
there's like different things you want to look at. If
yeah.
reliability, for example, is an issue, we spent 5 years getting from 99% reliability to 99.99% reliability. And if you need like
Yeah.
this amount of, or this level of reliability, it's a great service regardless of how much updates you do, because even if you do
Mm.
like a simple copy paste, people make mistakes.
That's a very good point. My question there was unfairly simplistic, where like the number of sites involved is one pressure in play. But like to bring us back a few minutes, like if we're talking about a publicly traded company, that pressure alone is enough to push you towards using a module like this. Or
Yes.
um, uh, yeah, how many people are involved? You may have only one site, but if there are 100 people involved, that again might push you to using a more robust system. All
Yeah,
right. Well,
that works
speaking
at
of
scale. Yeah.
more robust systems, let's see what else this thing can do.
Yes. So what we've seen before is like a fully automated update. So the content was pushed manually, meaning the editor could choose whether or not they wanted to push, and then the update was applied immediately. So the second it went to our service, we immediately sent it to the other side. What I'm going to show now is how to configure content sync to work more asynchronously. So for that, I'm going to go over to the flows section of our module, where you can define any number of configurations of how content should be pushed or pulled, and you can create really any number of them. So you can have like a different workflow for media elements compared to your regular pages, or your menu items could work differently than your regular pages and things like that. For now, I'm just going to go to the pull flow that I have already created. And as you can see at the bottom, it's currently set to pull new content immediately. So the second it hits the service, it's pulled into the site. And I can change that to work manually, giving more control to the editor. So now the editor can pick and choose what kind of content they want to have in the site, not just by being in the pool, but they can actually go to our content dashboard, they can search for the content, and then pull it into the site whenever they want. For that, I'm also going to change the update behavior. So by default, as you can see, it says update and forbid editing. So that means if a content comes, for example, from site A, then the editor on site B is not allowed to edit that content, because that can very easily make it very complicated for editors to understand what's going on. So it's usually easier to have like one page where at least one specific piece of content is edited. But if you edit it on this site, you still get a message with a link back to the source site. So it's still convenient for the editor, but it can avoid confusion. That's why this is the default, which we're going to change to allow local changes. So if your editor teams works more autonomously, more independently, then they might want to localize content. So maybe you have different sites for different regions, they have a different target audience, you want to change the wording of content, add an image, replace an image to be more appropriate or work better for your target audience, then you can allow editors to do it with local changes, but they still have the upside of having like 95% of the content be there, and then they can optimize like the last 5% for their specific site. And the second step is where you define the entity type settings. So by default, which is, as you see it now, you have the nodes on the left and then everything else in the middle. What that means is that editors can independently push or pull, for example, articles and basic pages and recipes in this case. And then everything that's in the middle column just comes along with the content. So if you have a page that references a file, the file comes along with the page. If you have a media element or taxonomy terms and all of that, it's all included whenever you push or pull an article. So that's the main difference between these two columns. So you could also, I don't know, allow editors to manually pull menu link content or push menu link content, for example, manually. If you have like a different workflow, right? Yeah.
This is reminding me of tension that I often felt in my Drupal site building days, where I felt a certain set of pressure to strip out or hide some Drupal implementation details. Like if I'm the developer and I'm working with content editors, do I want or need them to know and comprehend the terms article, basic page, recipe, block content, file, media, menu? Like there's just a lot of like glossary terms to have to learn. So there's pressure to like, oh, don't worry about half of these. But at the same time, there's like pressure in the other direction of, well, if you don't know what all of those mean, it might bite you later. So so you might as well learn them. How do you think about that problem space? Like, should everyone working on the site have to know what each of these bold terms means?
Certainly not all of them. But I think most are kind of relevant to get like a basic understanding of how things work, but they should not be worried about them. So I feel if, for example, you would configure things in a completely manual way, so you would have to like pull everything manually and push everything manually, that would probably confuse editors a lot. So I would try and hide as much as I can, but still, give them like a basic understanding of how things work, so they're less confused when they're in their day-to-day use, I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense. What are some situations that cause your customers to move things from the middle column to that left column?
Yeah, so taxonomy terms, for example, are an interesting one. So there are many customers who want to have the same taxonomy terms available on all of their sites. And so they just immediately sync them whenever they're added or changed on a site. So they're available on all sites and they're in sync like all the time, ready to be used by editors. So this can avoid like typos. This can avoid having like the same tag twice, which then works differently because it has different IDs and stuff like that. But that's one good example, I would say. Then some also like to have more control over their menus, so they want to publish their menus independently. Some even share files and media independently if they really have a need for it, and use them more as like standalone entities. So it kind of, I mean, Drupal gives you all these options. You can do so much. So everyone is using it like slightly differently. And so if medias are almost like a page, you might want to have them in the left column instead, for example.
Yes, I am, thinking about that in the context of like we recently relaunched Pantheon.io in modern Drupal. It had been Drupal 7 for a long time, and
nice.
yes, we did it. We got there.
Congratulations! Yeah.
And thinking about like, okay, we previously didn't have much representation of like our YouTube videos on our site. Okay, I can represent that as media, but also may want these conceptualized as individual pages.
Yes.
That's I think that's something. I mean, I hit that on my very first Drupal project 16 years ago, and it's still a challenging problem space.
Yes, I mean, it completely depends on your requirements, how you want to do things, and then sometimes how difficult an implementation is. So maybe it's just easier to do it as a media entity rather than a node.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got this all of this configuration, and then what comes next?
So now I'm just going to hit save. Now there's some stuff going on in the background. So basically, we're now sending all of the configuration to our service so that our service knows what entity types you have, what fields they have, and how it should be routed. And that's it now. So we now have successfully updated the flow, which means from now on, we're going to pull content manually into the site.
And we've got a question here from Phil.
Yes,
does
that is
the
an excellent
content type
question.
have to exist on both sites with identical fields? And perhaps secondarily, can this tool be used to sync taxonomies?
Yes, great question.
I think you just answered the second question. Yes, we can sync taxonomy terms.
Yes, exactly.
What about?
Then the fields, we recommend that they're identical. So what has to be identical is the required fields. So we're not going to update content if a required field is going to be missing on the receiving side, because then we assume that the content would be broken. So that's like a requirement where you should make sure that like the required setting of the field is appropriate, say. But as long as that is given, we can also synchronize content if there's one page that has a field more or less. You can configure that. And if you want to dig really deep, there's also the option to add like custom field handlers. So if you wanted to ignore like one specific field and rather have like a local value for one field in your content, you could customize that through code as well, for example. And then taxonomy terms we can sync in any way. So you can sync them with the content, or you can sync them independently, regardless of the content. So yeah, both possible.
I've got a related follow-up question. A situation that I hit too frequently was like, here's a site that has a field machine named field_image. Here's another site, field_primary_image. And the fact that they have different machine names is just a byproduct of like different developers made these at different points in time. But you know what? They're pretty much the same thing. Do you handle that situation?
We don't map fields, so we don't change like one field name to another field name. So in that case, you would have to have like a new consistent naming in your field. So you could add like a second field and then kind of phase out the usage of the old fields. That's what I would recommend.
That's probably for the best.
Solution.
I mean, I feel like sometimes the Drupal community, and I very much include myself in this, will bend over backwards to accommodate situations where you might be better off saying, you know what, just clean it up.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a hammer, then a lot of problems start looking like nails.
Yes, if you have alter hooks, everything looks alterable.
Yes. Yeah, there was another question.
Yes,
so does it work
Rita's
with WordPress?
asking, what about WordPress?
So right now it's limited to Drupal, so we have like a prototype in WordPress, but we didn't see like enough people wanting it. But you can definitely reach out to us, and we'll add you to the list of people who are interested. And if that grows big enough, then we're also going to release it for WordPress as well. It's more a matter of when it's like worth it regarding the support that we would then have to do. In general, it can work with WordPress, but right now it's not published. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and just a reminder, head to cms-content-sync.io to find Thiemo and team.
All right. Yeah. Then maybe back to the polling. So I'm just going to go ahead and create another piece of content. So I'm just going to create a recipe now. This is going to be Karlsschwatzen, which is a great German dish. I have no idea about cooking. It will definitely take me 2 hours. So this is easily under 20 minutes cooking time. I didn't know there was a difference. Let's say it takes me 40 minutes to mentally prepare myself.
Yes, maybe some help text on these fields would help us out here. But yeah, I think this is the difference between assembling or preparing the dish and the amount of time the dish may be in the oven or on the stove.
Yeah, maybe like cooking stuff. Cutting stuff and cooking stuff. Yeah, something like that. For me, this is definitely hard. It's going to be main course. Attack with E. Alcohol free. Yes, there's no, as far as I know. I've never been told otherwise. I'm just going to hit this all again. I'm going to select a nice image for this as well. Summary. Most greatest dish. That seems like proper English. There's definitely cheese in there. Yeah, apparently I've done this before.
Well, one thing I've learned is I've noticed like the red squiggly coming up under words that are spelled correctly in English, and then there was no red squiggle under the title of this dish. I'm like, oh wow, not only is Thiemo syncing content across all of these sites, he's doing it in a second language.
He doesn't even speak proper English, yes.
But no, not that you don't speak proper English, but that your computer is something in your computer settings is spell checking in German, not in English.
Yes, it is. Prepare, cook, enjoy. Then also share the recipe. That's the most important step, I guess. I'm just going to hit save and push because I've already shown like the other functionality from before with the asynchronous pushing. Now, if we watch the progress, you can see that only one site is mentioned. So now it only says it has been pushed to site C, meaning site B is missing. So we have not pushed it to site B because site B is now configured to pull content manually into it. So if we go to the content overview page, there's a new tab called Content Cloud. And if I go in there, I can now see all of the content that has been pushed from the other sites. So as you can see, there's also a auto-generated preview that uses like an image field if there is one, that uses formatted text field and summarizes it if there is one, that also attaches the different tags. So you can also, for example, click on this and it will show all the main courses. So kind of like an easy way to get started, to get your editor started. They can search through all of that content, so including the description, the tags, and everything in here. And there are also some advanced filters available. So you can, for example, if you want to have, I think we had that like last time, Steve, that maybe you want to see only relevant articles from like within the last 7 days. So you can just filter by that, and it will show like all of the the new content apparently. And there's also a default button here. So if I hit that, I can then just see the progress of the synchronization, and now it's available on this side as well. And if I click on the view link, I can now see the content as like an exact replica as we created it on site A, including things like taxonomy terms, the image that we added. So all of that is just synchronized in the back end along with the recipe. So it just comes in one functional piece.
Yeah. And one thing this is somewhat off topic. I don't think I noticed this in our run through last week. The amount of is it CSS animations that you're doing in these buttons? I just think that is an excellent touch that you don't often see in Drupal modules, that sort of attention to visual detail. But I like it.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah. So it's an interactive dashboard actually in React. So that so that editors actually enjoy using it.
Imagine that.
Yes, seems to be a problem sometimes. I'm just going to go ahead and edit this piece of content, and as you can see, there's now a button that allows me to make local changes. So usually by default the content would be disabled, so I could not edit it or make changes. Now an editor can go ahead and click edit, and then say they want to make local changes, and also now says that remote updates will now be ignored. So by default, if I were to make an update on site A, it would also update the content on site B. That's like the default behavior. And now if I make overrides to this content, if I make changes, I obviously don't want them to be overwritten the next time an editor on site A decides to push something. So instead, if I select to make changes, they are going to be persistent. So I can just, for example, change the title, save the content on this page. And now I have like a distinct version that's customized to my local audience that likes improved cast ready to be served. Yeah, and that's the override functionality that we have in the module.
That is very slick. So yeah, so we're on site B. We did an override here. Have we yet seen updates going from site A automatically through to site B?
That's what we show.
Site C.
Site C. I don't think so, but we can just go ahead to site C, content overview dashboard. And as you can see, it has the page to be created. And it also has the dish that we did, because site C is still configured to pull in updates automatically or new content. So it already got the cache button before we pulled it into site B even.
So at this point, if the original were edited on A, it would automatically appear in C, but not B. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. So if I go ahead and edit this and say this is version 2, having any better ideas? I can now see the progress again, that it's now checking both sides, but it's going to be rejected on site B. So if I, where was it? Here, this one. If I reload this page, you can see it's still better improved. So it did reject the changes basically from the sync core or from our service. And then on site C, if I refresh, I can now see that it's now also saying cache button P2, for example, in this case.
That is very slick. Just one thing that occurred to me is, how does this intersect with Drupal's concept of cache contexts? I find it impressive that, like, I think what we just saw there is as you refreshed this administrative dashboard on site C, we saw the V2 title immediately. I guess I have at least two questions in there. Can you just unpack more of how it is that site C is updated right away, and then secondarily, how does this interact with Drupal's cache contexts?
Yeah, so site C is still configured, or still has like the original flow that we had initially. So that just says to pull all of the recipes, basic pages immediately.
Yeah.
So now it's
so under the hood is the content pool from the content sync service making some sort of API hit to site C such that the update is instantaneous because it's some sort of post request or something going to site C from the content pool.
Do you mean technically? Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's completely REST through REST. So but it works asynchronously. So a push operation, for example, if I say I want to push content to the service, you're actually just notifying our service. So you don't send the content, because that would take like a couple of seconds at least, and that would kind of disrupt editor performance-wise. And so instead, our service gets notified. It then asks asynchronously Drupal for the content so that it doesn't interrupt the user flow. And then it checks where it should be sent, and then it does like the post request to the REST interfaces of site C and also site B. And then site B checks the status of the content and sees, okay, there's like a change to this content. We don't want to overwrite that, so we're going to skip it. And site C says, yes, I want the update, because the update behavior says update for bit editing, but also update, compared to, for example, ignoring all updates. So if you just want to have like a content template, then you could pull that template into a site and then just ignore all future revisions from the source side, because you're definitely going to make local changes if that's what you want to do workflow-wise. So it can be like default content that you can add to sites through service as well.
Yeah, and then is there anything that you need to be doing within your module specific to Drupal's concept of cache contexts?
Yeah, luckily Drupal does that completely automatically. So if you, as long as you're using the Drupal API, it's going to see, okay, they saved the node, so they don't want to have the cached version of the node anymore. And the same goes usually with your CDNs as well. So they usually also just pick up through like a hook in Drupal and see, okay, the node has been updated, or the file has been updated, for example, and I'm just going to clear the CDN cache, for example.
Yeah, to me that feels like affirmation that much of the deep refactoring that happened between Drupal 7 and Drupal 8 paid off in a big way, because like it's good that you developing this module didn't have to do anything specific to caching, and that's a reflection of how much how much effort folks like Wim Leers and Fabian Franz put into the caching system in Drupal 8, that it just works, because if that effort had not been put in, you probably would have to do who knows what to make this work with caching.
It would be back to field collections.
Right. Right.
But yeah, really, really great job. And I mean, it's kind of an abstract system. You have to get used to how it works with like the different cache tags and all that. But it's a great system that works usually very reliably. Like I haven't seen like a widescreen of death from a cache issue in years.
All right. Well, thank you, Wim and Fabian and everyone else who worked on the cache system in Drupal 8. All right. So we're about 45 minutes into the stream. Is there anything more you want to show here, Thiemo?
Yeah, one thing just for the updates dashboard. So one thing that's super important for us is observability. So to give you insight into what's happening, so you can see all of the updates that are being done. You can see their status, and also if anything goes wrong, make it really easy to troubleshoot. So for example, when we broke site, I think it was site B, that was site C actually. You can see that the status is failed, and you can just go ahead, view the latest error, and it will give you like all of the request details, including like the URL, settings, headers, the request body, the response body. So you can retry the exact same request that we are making with our service to kind of troubleshoot this issue even in different environments. And this gives you full transparency and observability over what's going on under the hood. And you can also check the updates across all of your sites to see everything that's happening at all.
Excellent. All right. Well, we have seen a whole lot of things. I'm going to bring up our diagram one more time here. Make sure I understand everything we saw here. So, in that first, let me bring out some more Legos here. In that first use case, we made some content on site A. It automatically pushed up to the content pool, and then very quickly down to sites B and C. We also saw some variations where an individual site could say, I don't want automatic updates. I want to be able to do a local configuration, change the shape of the content or change the words of the content. And then when a content update comes through, perhaps changing the image or changing who knows what on site A, that can still automatically go through that path that we saw. But site B is not going to get that kind of automatic update because the shape of the content had been overridden. We also saw in there that you can have many different pools. Much of what we were showing was what I'm assuming is your most common use case of like there's one big pool and the sites control how they interact. But we saw in that dashboard that like you could have a pool specific to any combination of sites, so that if for some reason you wanted on site A to say, oh, this should only be going to the pool specific to site B, you could do that. So
yeah, exactly. And you can also group, like if you have 100 sites, you can group 10 sites together or 20 sites together, and you can have as many of these groupings as you like. And yeah, as you said before, so usually, or like I would say half our customers only have one pool, especially if they're using the staging, then you just need one pool. And then you can also auto-assign these pools. So what you've seen in like the sidebar where I selected the pool, you can automate that through configuration as well. So we automatically assign like the one pool that you have, for example.
Well, that's great. All right. So if anyone here is interested in trying out what you've seen from Thiemo, again, you can sign up for a free trial of Content Sync. You can replicate everything you saw here with free sites on Pantheon. On the Pantheon side, you only need to pay for Pantheon once you want to go live with your site and connect up a real domain name, and it's a trial situation with Content Sync. Thiemo, any closing thoughts before we go?
Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you all for joining in. And if you have any questions, you can definitely just reach out to us or give it a try.
All right. Well, thank you, Thiemo, and thanks for everyone watching. See you on the internet.
Have a good time. Bye-bye.